One of the things I hate about YouTube is that it's full of dickheads. I mean, so is the internet and the world in general, but YouTube has a particular subset of dickheads I find even more useless than most. And that's the right-wing pop culture geeks. Not geeks for right-wing pop culture, which would be bad enough, but the miserable fuckers whose only contribution to the discourse is whining about how bad everything is because of women, leftists, social justice, political correctness, all of that. Of course, complaining that things aren't what they used to be is one of the oldest tendencies in human thought. In Western culture, you can trace it back at least as far as the poet Hesiod, who wrote about the 5 ages of man around 700 BC, and it almost certainly wasn't a new idea then. Similarly, in Hinduism you have the 4 yugas, in Aztec mythology you have the 5 suns, and so forth. And the common theme in this sort of thinking is that things only get worse from one age to the next, and whatever era we're living in now is the worst possible one. Age of Iron, Kali Yuga, whatever, this here and now is as bad as it gets. And you'll always find someone who just can't handle the fact that things change. You don't have to like whatever modern world you've been born into. I'm certainly not 100% thrilled by this one. But there are ways of accommodating to it, and acknowledging that the past may not have been the greatest thing ever, and admitting that some things now actually are an improvement, is a healthy way to do so. I'd rather not live in a world with nuclear weapons, but I kind of like some of the medicinal advances that I've benefited from in recent years. But the changes of the last half century or so have been so much for some people that they've produced a reaction that perhaps feels stronger than it has in the past, and the internet has been a major amplifier for that. And what I've called the right-wing pop culture geeks is a particular manifestation of that reaction. On YouTube, for example, it appears in the form of channels like The Quartering, Geeks and Gamers, and Nerdrotic. And I get no sense of these people actually having any real interest in pop culture as such. What they're interested in is grifting. They're interested in blasting things like Doctor Who or Star Wars or whatever to get attention, and hopefully ad revenue from other dickheads who need someone to affirm their hatred of women, leftists, social justice, political correctness, etc. It's a market, and however shameful and unpleasant a market may be, there's usually money to be made from pandering to it. If you have no shame, so much the better. And Nerdrotic made a particularly shameless ass of himself on Twitter recently. Nerdrotic's real name is Gary, because it would be, and Gary's chief interest is apparently going on and on about the same things he hates. Let's consider a bunch of his video titles. Rings of Power Lies, Rings of Power DOA, Amazon Cringe, Rings of Power Destroyed by Tolkien Fans, Amazon Exposed, Rings of Power is Fake Tolkien, Rings of Power is Doomed, Amazon Hides Cringe, Rings of Power Teaser, The Woke Appropriation of Lord of the Rings, Kenobi a Repurposed Disaster, Kenobi Falls Flat, Disney's failure is complete again, Kenobi and Ms. Marvel fail together. Toxic Lucasfilm blames fans for its failures again. Moon Knight is another Disney Marvel disaster. And all the times he calls the Marvel Cinematic Universe the MCU. I think you get the point. Oh, and Alex Jones has been a guest on Gary's channel too, which I think tells you quite a lot. Anyway, as I was saying, Gary got particularly egregious on Twitter the other day when he turned his attention to Doctor Who for a change. Now, I've been watching Doctor Who since 1985, Colin Baker was my first Doctor, and in that time I've had many opportunities to see just how appalling the alleged fandom of the show can be. Frankly, people who think it's bad now should have seen Doctor Who Bulletin in the late 80s when John Nathan Turner was still the producer. It just seems bad now because, again, the internet amplifies the idiots. And few things were going to trigger the fuckwits like casting a woman in the lead role. Now, one of the main premises of the show, at least since 1966, is that the lead role is recast every few years whenever the current actor is ready to move on to something else, or, frankly, the BBC wants to get rid of them. This was written into the show's mythology as part of the Doctor's alien biology. It's something the character needs to do every so often to stave off death. People accepted this. But in 2017, Jodie Whittaker was cast as the Doctor, and the idea that a centuries-old alien with noticeably non-human biology who changes form every now and then could turn into a woman, well, that was too much to believe for some people. Gary was clearly one of those, as this sample of his posts about the show indicates, but his Twitter post from the other day is more hilariously desperate to make a point about how bad the WOMs are. Remember when the first female Doctor, in capitals, played by Jodie Whittaker's first act was to crash the TARDIS? #RIP Doctor Who. Now, many people responded that crashing the TARDIS after regenerating was actually what her 3 most recent male predecessors did, but the proper answer to Gary's question is, of course, no, because that's actually not what happens in the episode. The 12th Doctor's regeneration energy damages the TARDIS before the Doctor's even turned into Whittaker, whose first act is actually to check her reflection in a monitor screen, then press a button on the console, which we've just seen partly blow up before she even came into existence. The TARDIS then shits itself, turns on its side, and ejects the Doctor somewhere over Sheffield, then disappears. It doesn't crash anywhere. Gary was so determined to score a point against Jodie Whittaker for daring to be the first female lead on a TV program he has no genuine interest in anyway, that he had to actively lie about a scene that didn't exist. And as of making this video, that tweet is still up. Most people, when they post something that stupid and get that many responses calling them out, would probably just delete the thing and move on, but I feel like Gary's probably getting a hard-on from triggering the libs. Gary is 5 years older than me, which only demonstrates that you can make it into your 50s without ever becoming a grown adult. But the amazing thing is, some other right-wing dickhead actually managed to say something even more stupid in response to him. This is the wit and wisdom of QuickestCurves. I have a problem with Capaldi, not as an actor, he's good, but because he was Mr. Frobisher in Children of Earth. Same universe. I mean, yeah, Peter Capaldi did have a major role on those episodes of Torchwood, which was a spin-off of the revived series of Doctor Who before he was the Doctor. He also appeared in Doctor Who itself before he was the Doctor. He was Caecilius in The Fires of Pompeii, which episode also featured Karen Gillan before she became a main character of the show. The 12th Doctor's resemblance to Caecilius is actually directly addressed in the show at a couple of points. Plus, Capaldi isn't even the first Doctor to have appeared in another role on the show before he was the Doctor. Behold Colin Baker as Commander Maxil in 1983's Arc of Infinity. Of the secondary cast, Peter Purves, Nicholas Courtney, John Levine, Ian Marter and Lalla Ward would all play other parts on the show before taking on their regular roles. In fact, Purves' previous part was in the same serial, The Chase, which introduced his regular character. The pool of acting talent in the world may be vast, but it's not infinite. And if a show runs long enough like Doctor Who has, you'll get some doubling up, and normal people just get over that fact. I don't think anyone had trouble believing in Michael Wisher as Davros, the creator of the Daleks, because he'd been a Dalek voice performer in 3 other stories before that, not to mention his previous on-screen appearances. But if this QuickestCurves character has that much trouble believing in characters played by people that he's seen play other roles in the same fictional universe, I hope he never discovers Pat Gorman, who appeared in more episodes of the original series of Doctor Who than most of the actual regulars. Pat Gorman never really had a proper leading role in his entire career, but he was ever present all over films and TV in some small capacity, credited or not. Sometimes, when he was on Doctor Who, he did more than one part in the same episode. Which one were we supposed to believe in, if we want to put it in those terms? Anyway, Russell T Davies is returning as the show's producer, which is something Gary actually appears to be kind of happy about, at least as long as Davies undoes all the damage that Chris Chibnall did, at least in his opinion. But if a female Doctor was an unbelievable prospect, the BBC have upped the stakes by casting Ncuti Gatwa as Jodie Whittaker's successor. This is going to confuse all the shitheads who couldn't cope with Whittaker because the Doctor is male again, but he's also black. And possibly also gay, but black at any rate. And I don't know how Gary and his ilk will respond to this when the new era starts, but I'm sure it'll be ugly at any rate, and he'll probably make dozens of videos and tweets about it. And they'll probably continue to be massively stupid.